About 10 months ago, I was given an image of an easel and asked if I could make a similar one out of wood. And given that my deadline was 11 months away, I said sure, no problem. Well, I've only got a month left, so it's about time for me to get the project completed. Now, my original intentions were to make this easel out of some really curly maple, and I actually took a scrap board or a piece of the material and made a test sample with some dye. It looked really good, but I found out that she wants the easel to be painted black and white. So there's no way I'm going to cover up curly maple with paint. Instead, I'm going to use poplar. As with the vast majority of all of my projects, my first step is to take my material to the miter saw station and start cutting out all of my groups of parts to rough length first. After all of the rough cross cuts, I can start in on some of the rip cuts, and I'll do all these at the table saw. Now, I am following a layout diagram that I put together, and anytime that I do use a layout diagram, it's very easy and convenient for me to make the cut according to the layout diagram and then put the pieces back into place somewhere else, just like they're laid out on the layout diagram. And that allows me to know exactly what pieces have and have not been cut just yet. I'm doubling the thickness of all the pieces that will make up the easel itself, and during glue ups sometimes pieces tend to shift and move around, and because I cut everything to rough length now and then after glue up I'll cut everything to their final length, this gives me some room on either side of all the pieces that will be cut off anyway. So I can use this room to drive a couple brad nails, one on either side of all of my glue up pieces, and what that will do is pin the pieces in place and allow me to put them in clamps and not have to worry about them wiggling around during the glue up. Once the glue has dried, the pieces can be milled to their final dimensions, starting at the jointer to clean up one glued edge. Then the table saw will determine their final width, and finally back to the miter saw to cut everything to the final length. The common angle for all of the easel parts is 5 degrees. Now the front two legs both have a 5-degree cut on bottom and top, and they are parallel of one another, and what that'll allow is this to be splayed out somewhat like an A-frame, and that way these bottom faces are flush on the ground. Now up here, this top horizontal support is already predetermined. I need to figure out whatever length this piece is. So I've already, like I said, determined the final length that this needs to be in SketchUp. So I can put these together so that the top is all flush and then clamp them together. So this is in its final location. I can use the back leg to simulate the ground, putting up against the bottom of the feet, and then measure up the distance that I want this to be, which I think 19.5 inches is appropriate. I've already marked a line, and now I can take the 5-degree face that's already cut on this lower one, put it over there, and wherever it lines up, I can transfer this dimension onto this board and then mark the appropriate angled cut direction and then make this cut at the miter saw. I forgot that not only do the legs lean 5 degrees left and right, but they also, the entire easel leans 5 degrees back. So right before assembly, I set my miter gauge to 5 degrees and tilted the blade on my table saw to 5 degrees and just trimmed up just a tiny bit on the bottom of each one of the feet to get that appropriate compound angle. I am concerned a little bit with how the back side of this will look. So I do want to have some type of hidden joinery. Something like dowels would be a really good option if you have a doweling jig. I don't. I have a machine to make floating tenons, so that's the route I'm going to go. It's quick and easy for me to do. If you are not concerned with how the backside looks, then you could definitely use pocket holes in this situation.
Hello.
For the back leg, I cut the top at 90 degrees and then placed it on top of the assembled frame to determine my total length. And again, on the bottom part, I mitered that at 5 degrees so that it'll sit flush once opened. The back leg is going to be mounted to the back of the frame up on the top side only with a hinge, and that will allow it to pivot like so. That means I can just keep rotating this all the way around and flush mount the hinge right on both surfaces. And because no one's going to see this at all, I just went through my scrap bin and found a hinge that I had on hand and slightly modified it to work. My original intentions were to attach this shelf to this lower support before assembly with floating tenons. I don't know why I didn't do it then. I just completely forgot about it. So now I could use floating tenons, but the legs are in the way, so it'll be kind of close to the middle for the fasteners. I don't really want that, so I think I'm just going to instead attach it to the lower support from the back side with a couple screws. The chalkboard frame starts with a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, and I'll cut that to size on the table saw. And while I'm at the table saw, the rest of my material stock needs to be ripped to 1.5 inches, and this will accommodate all of the frame pieces that will be wrapped around this plywood. The perimeter frame pieces are going to be held in place with butt joints and just regular glue and brad nails, and I've attached the short rails to the panel at my workbench. But for the long rails, the plywood has a little bit of a cup to it, a little bit of a bow to the panel. So I had to clamp these 2 straight edges to the panel to flatten everything out. And now I can tack on these long rails. And once I get these glued and nailed into place, I'm going to let this panel sit for about a half hour to an hour to let the glue really cure on these long rails, and hopefully that'll prevent any type of cup or bow in this plywood panel from coming back. To make the interior molding, I'm setting my table saw fence to 1/4 inch and tilting the blade to 21 degrees. And this molding will be mitered inside the frame, but I'm not going to secure it just yet. I'm just going to fit it in place. And that's because I want to get 1 coat of the chalkboard paint on first and let that dry overnight before I come back tomorrow and start the sanding and finishing process on all of my pieces. Just to break up some of the visual blockiness of the project, I used a router to create a chamfer all the way around the entire project except the chalkboard frame. After that, it's just sanding and finish prep as usual, and then the frame itself, the easel frame, got a coat of black paint, and the chalkboard frame got a coat of white paint. Now, it's extremely difficult to show all the details. The 2 colors that are hardest to show up on camera, to show detail on camera, is black and white, and I've got both of them in this project, so it's a little bit more difficult to show. If you have any questions for this particular project, be sure to check out the website article for this build, and I'll post a link to it in the description below. And in a couple days, I'll do a little bit of a follow-up video on my vlog channel. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, and I'll be sure to answer as many as I can, or the predominant questions on that vlog video, which always comes out every Tuesday after a build video. If you're interested in plans for this, I do have some on my website as well. And thanks for watching. You guys take care. and have a great day.